After years in the public eye, here's proof that Kate Middleton is ready to be queen. In recent years, Princess Catherine has fully stepped into her role as queen-in-waiting.
Princess Anne has been by her mother's side. Queen Elizabeth's daughter, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, said it's been a, quote, honor and a privilege to be with her mother on her final journeys.
A storm is rising behind palace doors. What began as a quiet political move by Queen Camilla has now become one of the monarchy's greatest tests, a battle that could decide its very future. The crown once promised by Queen Elizabeth to her beloved daughter-in-law Catherine now stands at the center of a silent war. But when Camilla tried to bend that legacy in her favor, she faced an unshakable force, Princess Anne. Loyal, sharp, and fearless, Anne stepped forward to defend her mother's word. She knew that some promises are sacred and some crowns are not meant to be claimed by others. So the question is, how far will Anne go to protect her mother's legacy? And can Catherine truly reclaim the crown, that destiny and duty once reserved for her? Stay with us, because this isn't just a story about jewels or titles, it's a fight for the very soul of the monarchy. When sparkle vanished from the palace, the coronation should have been breathtaking. Cameras captured every angle as Charles accepted the crown, robes flowing behind him like crimson rivers. Camilla stood beside him, her own coronet gleaming under Abbey lights. Yet something felt off to those who knew royal protocol inside out. Scan through the photographs carefully. Every princess, every duchess, every titled woman in attendance appeared without their signature headpieces. Catherine, whose appearances in the lover's knot tiara had become iconic, wore simple flowers woven into her hair. Anne, known for her elegant pearl and aquamarine pieces, kept her look completely plain. Even the younger generation showed up bareheaded, a stark departure from centuries of tradition. Most viewers assumed it was a stylistic evolution, perhaps a conscious choice to appear more relatable to modern audiences. After all, Charles had been vocal about wanting a leaner, more accessible monarchy. But palace insiders whispered a different story entirely. This wasn't about choice or fashion, it was a mandate. Shortly after Camilla's coronation, a memo had circulated through official channels. Effective immediately, tiaras would no longer be worn at any royal function. The language was diplomatic, framing the decision as part of broader efforts to streamline traditions and reduce extravagance. It aligned perfectly with Charles's long-stated goals about environmental consciousness and connecting with everyday citizens. Yet to those who understood royal symbolism, the ban felt like something else entirely, a calculated move to ensure only one crown mattered going forward. Each tiara in the royal collection told a story. Victoria's sapphire circlet spoke of imperial strength. Elizabeth's Girls of Great Britain piece carried the weight of a young queen finding her footing. Diana's favorite, the Cambridge Lover's Knot, had become a bridge between past and present when Catherine began wearing it. These weren't just pretty objects locked in vaults. They were living connections to history, worn by women who'd shaped the monarchy through war, scandal, triumph, and loss. To remove them from use was to sever those connections, to suggest that history before Camilla's arrival mattered less than what came after. For Catherine, the impact was deeply personal. She'd never sought the spotlight, but the tiara moments had become part of her identity as Princess of Wales. When she wore Diana's favorite pieces, people saw continuity, a visual reminder that William's mother's legacy lived on through his family. Now, sitting in her private quarters at Kensington, she felt that connection being stripped away. During public appearances, she maintained perfect composure, smiling, waving, engaging warmly with crowds. But friends noticed the strain. Her hands would shake slightly while pouring tea. Her eyes would cloud over when someone mentioned the new, simplified approach. She'd dedicated years to charitable work, to raising 3 children in an impossible spotlight.
Now Princess of Wales, this is Kate showing you what she wants to do with that title, launching a new campaign
to being the steady presence the institution needed. and now she was being told, in effect, that her sparkle could be dimmed whenever it suited someone else's agenda. Anne's reaction was quieter, but no less intense. As the Queen's daughter, she'd spent decades embodying duty without complaint. Her tiara wasn't about vanity, it was armor, a visible link to her mother's reign and values. When the ban took effect, Anne found herself pacing palace corridors late at night, unable to sleep. She'd replay conversations with Elizabeth, particularly one from the final months of her mother's life. "These pieces hold our story," the Queen had said, her voice weak but clear. "Guard them carefully. They belong to those who come after us." At the time, Anne had assumed it was general advice about preservation. Now those words felt like a warning she'd failed to heed. The ban's reach extended rapidly. State banquets that once glittered with ancestral jewels now featured only Camilla's coronation pieces. Charity events came with strict dress codes, no headpieces whatsoever. Foreign dignitaries noticed and commented, though always politely. Some saw it as refreshingly modern. Others found it oddly authoritarian. This insistence that everyone conform to a new aesthetic. Social media lit up with divided opinions. Younger commenters praised the move away from outdated displays of wealth. Royal historians expressed concern about erasing visual ties to the past. And through it all, Catherine and Anne maintained public silence, even as frustration built behind closed doors. The final straw came at a summer garden party. Catherine arrived in a lovely floral dress, her hair styled simply. A visiting dignitary approached, effusive in her compliments. "This new minimalist approach suits you wonderfully," the woman gushed. "So much more relatable than all that heavy jewelry your predecessors insisted on." Catherine's smile never wavered, but inside something cracked. This wasn't about being relatable. This was about being erased, about having her place in the royal story diminished to accommodate someone else's insecurity. That evening, she placed a call to Anne. The conversation was brief, coded in case anyone was listening. But the message was clear. Something had to change, and it had to change soon. The document that changed everything. Anne had always been methodical, the kind of person who planned 3 steps ahead before making a move. So when she requested access to the Crown Jewels vault one quiet afternoon, no one thought twice about it. She was, after all, the Queen's daughter and a working royal with every right to review historical artifacts. The head curator accompanied her down into the climate-controlled chambers where centuries of treasure sat in carefully maintained silence. But Anne wasn't there to admire rubies or evaluate restoration work. She was hunting for something specific, her mother's private instructions about the collection. Royal wills are complex documents. The public versions outline succession and major assets, but monarchs often leave separate, detailed notes about personal items, particularly pieces with sentimental or historical significance. Elizabeth had been no different. Anne remembered references to such a document from discussions years earlier, but she'd never needed to consult it until now. The curator retrieved a leather portfolio, its contents protected by layers of archival paper. Inside, in Elizabeth's distinctive handwriting, were pages of careful notations. Some pieces were designated for museums. Others were earmarked for specific family members on particular occasions. And there, halfway down page 7, Anne found what she needed. The entry was unambiguous. "The St. Edward's lace tiara shall be reserved for Catherine, Princess of Wales, to be worn upon her assumption of queenly responsibilities. This piece represents continuity of purpose and dedication to service, qualities Catherine embodies completely." The date on the instruction was from Elizabeth's final year, written during a period of clear mental competency. It wasn't a suggestion or a hope. It was a directive from a reigning monarch about crown property. Anne's hands trembled slightly as she photographed the page with her phone. This changed everything. Camilla's ban, regardless of how it was justified, directly contradicted explicit orders from the late queen. In the hierarchy of royal authority, a deceased monarch's written instructions carried more weight than a living consort's verbal preferences. But possessing the document was only the first step. Anne needed to authenticate it beyond any shadow of doubt, because she knew Camilla's team would scrutinize every detail, looking for a reason to dismiss it. Over the following week, she quietly arranged for 3 separate experts to examine the will: a handwriting analyst, a historian specializing in royal documentation, and a legal scholar familiar with estate law. Each one returned identical conclusions: genuine, legally binding, and crystal clear in its intent. Armed with that validation, Anne began plotting her next moves. This couldn't be a sneak attack or a public ambush. It needed to be formal, ceremonial, unassailable in its propriety. She started reaching out carefully, beginning with William. They met for lunch at a small estate property, away from palace eyes and ears. Anne laid out what she'd found, watching William's expression shift from curiosity to anger to determination. "My grandmother specifically designated this for Catherine," he said quietly, "and someone decided that didn't matter." Anne nodded. "Which means we have a choice. We can accept that precedent, that anyone's preferences can override documented royal instructions. Or we draw a line here." William didn't hesitate. "We draw the line. Tell me what you need." With the future king on board, Anne felt her strategy solidify.
After his father, Prince Charles, Prince William is second in the line of succession to the British throne.
This wasn't about family drama or personal vendettas. This was about defending a principle that held the entire institution together. Continuity matters, promises endure, and authority doesn't expire just because someone new wants to redecorate. The next challenge was Charles. Anne loved her brother, but she knew he was caught in an impossible position: loyalty to his wife versus respect for his mother's memory. She couldn't force him to choose publicly. Instead, she needed to create a situation where protocol made the choice for him. That's when she conceived the formal reading. By framing it as a ceremonial duty, reviewing Elizabeth's specific bequests regarding the collection, she'd put Charles in a position where refusing would look like he was disregarding their mother's wishes. And once the document was read aloud in an official setting, with witnesses and records, it couldn't be quietly buried or reinterpreted. The directive would become part of the permanent record, binding on everyone going forward. Anne spent days rehearsing her approach, practicing her tone and posture. This had to come across as solemn responsibility, not personal attack. She selected the picture gallery for the reading, a room literally surrounded by portraits of past monarchs, all wearing their crowns and jewels. The symbolism would be unmistakable. This was about honoring those who came before, not challenging those currently in power. Invitations went out to Charles, Camilla, William, and Catherine, along with key household staff. The wording was formal and vague enough to avoid tipping off Camilla's team about what was coming. A ceremonial review of Her Late Majesty's specific instructions regarding collection items could mean anything.
The key difference between the crown jewels and the Queen's private collection.
But Anne knew that once everyone assembled, there'd be no turning back. The showdown in Portrait's shadow. The morning of the gathering arrived with unusual tension. Palace staff moved through preparations with nervous efficiency, sensing something significant was about to unfold without quite understanding what. Anne arrived first, dressed in a sharp navy suit that conveyed authority without aggression. She personally supervised the placement of a small display table at the room's center, where the tiara would rest alongside the open will. Every detail mattered: the lighting, the sight lines, the way documents would be visible to everyone present. This wasn't theater exactly, but it was definitely stagecraft in service of truth. William and Catherine came next. Catherine looked radiant despite the circumstances, wearing a simple dress that somehow emphasized her natural elegance more than any jewels could. William stood close to her, a silent wall of support. They exchanged brief nods with Anne, no words necessary. Everyone understood their roles. Charles entered looking troubled, clearly aware that this gathering wasn't routine but not yet certain what ambush might be coming. And finally, Camilla swept in, her bearing regal and her expression carefully neutral. She'd heard whispers something was afoot, but had been unable to pin down specifics. Now, seeing the setup, the tiara on display, the old leather portfolio, Anne's determined stance, she began to understand she'd been outmaneuvered. Anne called the room to order with quiet formality. "Thank you all for gathering. We're here to honor Her late Majesty's specific instructions regarding certain collection pieces." She opened the portfolio carefully, turning to the marked page. In her own hand, written during the final year of her reign, Queen Elizabeth left clear directions about this tiara. Anne read the passage aloud, her voice steady and resonant. Each word landed with weight, particularly the phrase, continuity of purpose and dedication to service. When she finished, the silence was profound. Everyone was processing what they'd just heard, not interpretation, not family folklore, but documented instruction from a queen who'd reigned for 70 years.
Not only is Queen Elizabeth Britain's longest reigning monarch,
Charles stood first, breaking the heavy quiet. His voice carried both resignation and relief. "My mother's wishes are plain and will be honored." He looked at Catherine with genuine warmth. "This piece was meant for you, and you shall have it when the time comes." It was a careful phrasing, acknowledging the instruction without making it about defying Camilla. But the message was unmistakable. The ban was finished, at least regarding this tiara. Camilla's face remained composed, though those who knew her well could see the calculation behind her eyes. She'd been checkmated in front of witnesses, with no graceful way to object without appearing petty or disrespectful to a beloved late queen. When the crown found its rightful place. But Anne wasn't done yet. She smoothly unveiled her second move, the Heritage Heirloom Project. Catherine would lead a digital archive of the royal collection, giving the public access to the stories behind each piece. Educational, transparent, and modern, it was a masterstroke. By pairing the tiara restoration with a forward-thinking project, Anne made opposition impossible. To resist now would mean opposing progress itself. Camilla realized it, forcing a tight smile. "A wonderful tribute to tradition and progress alike," she said, hiding her quiet defeat. Photographers entered, capturing the tiara beside the Queen's will. Anne resolute, Catherine serene, Charles relieved, Camilla composed. Within an hour, those images would dominate headlines, telling Anne's version of events. The palace issued a polished statement praising both tradition and innovation, crediting Camilla's modern vision and Anne's devotion to heritage. Yet everyone in that room knew the truth. Anne had just defended her mother's legacy, secured Catherine's future, and rewritten royal power without a single public confrontation. News of the tiara's restoration spread like wildfire across media platforms. Within hours, hashtags like Catherine's crown were trending worldwide, celebrating Anne's quiet power and Catherine's regained dignity. Commentators rushed to explain the royal precedent, while the public agreed it simply felt right. Younger audiences praised the digital archive project as a smart blend of history and technology. Older fans rejoiced that a long-standing wrong had finally been undone. Catherine's first public outing after the announcement became iconic. At a children's literacy event in Wales, she arrived wearing the lover's knot tiara, Diana's favorite. Cameras flashed as she greeted smiling schoolchildren, the sapphires glowing softly in the afternoon sun. The symbolism was unmistakable. Catherine had reclaimed her place, gracefully linking past and present. Social media erupted with comparisons. Before, she seemed uncertain. Now, radiant and assured. It wasn't just a fashion moment, it was a restoration of legacy. Behind palace walls, everything shifted. Charles privately thanked Anne, admitting she'd handled an impossible situation with a steadiness he couldn't have managed. William's silent embrace said it all. And when Catherine quietly took Anne's hands and whispered, "You saved more than a tiara. You saved what it means to keep promises," Anne only smiled, claiming she'd done what duty required. Yet privately, she allowed herself a moment of pride. Her mother's wishes were honored, and the monarchy's foundation stood firm. Camilla, ever the strategist, adjusted quickly. Her next speech spoke of respecting traditions and honoring the wisdom of those before us. A graceful retreat disguised as unity. Even her advisors admitted Anne's execution had been flawless. Resisting now would only damage Camilla further. Weeks later, the Heritage Heirloom Project launched with Catherine as its radiant face. The digital archive of royal jewels drew millions, each image paired with rich historical detail. Schools adopted the material, donors funded expansions, and what began as Anne's tactical victory became a lasting gift, transforming palace politics into public legacy. The real test came at a state banquet in Edinburgh months later. Catherine appeared in the St. Edward's lace tiara for the first time at a major formal event. The room fell silent when she entered, then erupted in spontaneous applause, a breach of protocol, but an honest expression of collective emotion. When Catherine rose to deliver a toast, she spoke briefly but powerfully about keeping promises and honoring commitments. "Our greatest treasures aren't the jewels we wear," she said, her voice carrying across the vaulted hall, "but the integrity with which we carry them forward." The tiara caught the light from dozens of chandeliers, sparkling like captured stars. And watching from nearby, Anne felt the final piece of tension release from her shoulders. It was done. The legacy was secure, and the quiet conviction of one determined woman had proven stronger than any royal decree. So here's what it all comes down to. The real royal battles aren't fought in front of camera. They happen in quiet rooms, where principle stares down power. Princess Anne didn't need speeches or scandals. She needed proof, strategy, and unshakable belief that a queen's promise is never negotiable. Catherine may have won back her crown, but the real victory was for the monarchy itself, reminded that continuity and honor will always outrank convenience. What do you think? Should royal reforms ever override the wishes of a past monarch, or are some legacies too sacred to touch? Tell us in the comments. We actually read them. And if this glimpse behind palace walls kept you hooked, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Because in the royal world, the real crown jewels aren't diamonds. They're the people brave enough to protect them.